This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual. Ladies and gentlemen, the host of WEBIT Virtual, Dr. Plamen Rusev.
Wonderful WEBIT community. Welcome to WEBIT Virtual, the second season with even more exciting and interesting topics. All of them focused on one goal, Goal 2030, achieving the SDGs through innovation and becoming a focal point for our community, supporting initiatives which could help us reach to Goal 2030, hopefully on time. This will be a fantastic journey. The first season of WEBIT Virtual was one of the most exciting and interesting journeys in my life. Not only in my life, in the life of most of our family members at WEBIT, because we're all one very, very big family. We had to adapt, we had to change, we had to do something completely different. People who are one of the best in the world in bringing 15,000 people from 120 different countries together in one place, in one location, now had to become virtual. And they've done it in grace. The first 50 events of WEBIT Virtual attracted the staggering 1 million virtual attendees. We gave ourselves 2 months to reflect. And here we are in 2021 with a new, even more exciting format and with a very big promise for all of you. We have proven that we are not giving any one of you time when you need us, we are there. Now this year and this season, we will be even closer to each and every one of you, but with special interviews and with special guests who will be able to ask questions and you will be able to ask questions. And we all will be taking from the knowledge, learning from the experiences, and hopefully work together. Without further ado, I would like to present you someone who many, many, many years ago I've read about, and later on in one of his past interviews, he said, "I am one of those people who couldn't sleep when I was 10 years old because I wouldn't think of how we are wrecking the planet. I think there are certain human beings that have those feelings and there are others that don't." Beautiful WEBIT community, I am absolutely sure that we as community with people with big hearts know what my guest means. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome here in the virtual studio of WEBIT, my first guest. He is partner and co-founder of largest mission-aligned firm in the world, Capricorn Investment Group.
Ion Yadigaroglu has been managing partner at Capricorn Investment Group since 2004 and is an early investor in iconic technology companies including Tesla, SpaceX, Planet, QuantumScape and Saildrone. Capricorn was born from the desire to demonstrate the huge investment potential that resides in breakthrough commercial solutions to the world's most pressing problems, and as such is one of the original impact investors. Prior to Capricorn, Ion was a director with Koch Industries, executing a range of acquisitions and investments.
One of the reasons that we chose to put the force on AI this season of WEBIT Virtual is that SDG Agenda 2030 is not possible to be accomplished without it. As WEBIT Foundation is closely related and committed to the SDG goals, I would like to start exactly with questions related to this. Ion, welcome to WEBIT.
Hello, Plan. Thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure to host you in our virtual environment and our virtual studios. And I'm sure that our guests are absolutely impatient to hear more about you. But first, Could you please trace the path that led you from this 10 years old believer with awakened and caring mind to the person who are now and who is now the co-founder and partner at Capricorn Investment Group, one of the largest mission-aligned firms in the world, that was born from a belief that sustainable investment practices can enhance risk-adjusted returns?
Sure. I think that story is true, that I still remember waking up.
I'm hopeful it is true. It's so touching.
No, it is. But I don't think it's uncommon. I think a lot of kids go through a phase, at least, where they start to hear and learn about big problems in the world, and it's really difficult to process. So I think that if you share that story with friends, you'll find out that quite a few lived through that. Maybe I'm a bit unique in that I just didn't move beyond the phase, right? Maybe it just stayed with me. But certainly there's many people out there that when they look at the degradation of the environmental systems or other big secular problems in the world, are really troubled by it, and it really affects the quality of their life, right? It's not something you just read about in the paper. But how did this all happen? It's a fun story, but like most of us, how we end up someplace in life is not really planned. It's a mix of good luck and good fortune and random events. In my case, I was really passionate about physics and math. I grew up with a father who was an engineer and a professor at University of California, Berkeley back in the day, and where I grew up. And so I spent my childhood, doing math and physics, tinkering with things, and just So I studied, we went back to Europe for a while, and so I studied physics and math at ETH in Switzerland. And then for graduate school, I wasn't a very good student undergrad. I think I was very good at the math and physics, but I was not very good at going to classes. And I would skip classes to go work with research groups, which, in America is a common thing, but in Switzerland, that was still a bit of a rebel kind of thing to do. And but the good news is some interesting papers came out of that. So when I graduated, the US universities really wanted me. And I looked at the East Coast and I said, let me go back to the Bay Area. I ended up at Stanford. And this is now 1992. So I showed up for a PhD at Stanford in 92. And I had done some work in particle physics, and we were using a tool called Mosaic to help run these collaborations. And so I certainly didn't invent the Mosaic tool or the web server that went with it, but I was a very early user of all that. And then Stanford really overnight became ground zero for the internet. So it really just kind of exploded around us. And being very nerdy, being very into software and computers, but in physics, et cetera, it was really just all around us. And to make a long story short, I also had a passion for investing. Strangely, I don't know where that came from, but like some kids, I bought a stock when I was 10 years old, of course, with my parents' help and the account. And so I had always read books about investing. I was buying and selling stocks as a kid. And my roommate at Stanford, just to kind of put it all together, had ended up co-founding eBay, which of course is a giant success of Internet 1.0 and continues to be an incredible business today. And so a couple of years later, I had in the meantime also started to do some things professionally in investing. And all that came together in that he had made many billions by founding eBay. And his passion, and it remains true today, was to spend that money philanthropically. And it's an incredible story, by the way, well worth telling, but it's not the topic for today. His passion is the importance of storytelling and helping society function. So he wanted to focus on spending the money. And to oversimplify a couple of years of history, we proposed, my partners and I proposed, well, what are you going to do with the money in the meantime? Why don't we invest it really well so you can we'll make a bunch of money, more money than we hope to make more money than you would make in, London or Wall Street and hedge funds or equities or whatever the conventional things are. But we can also make a big difference with the investing tool. And that was the genesis now almost 20 years ago of what we're still doing today.
What a story. And absolutely, you're right. I am one of these boys, like you, waking up and being alerted what is going to happen. Of course, first I was worried about my family, my parents. Like kids, we all believe that they're going to live forever. And what is going to happen? How is it going to happen? How we can save it? Every single planetary issue was reflecting. And I guess we were at that moment also very open to get this information. But very few of these people managed to do what you're doing, Ion, and that's fantastic. That's why we are so absolutely fortunate and honored to have you, not in this studio, I mean, among us, the humans. How much of your work is in Capricorn is related to projects which are with companies oriented at achieving the SDGs? What is the place of AI also in achieving the 2030 agenda from your point of view?
Yeah, well, those are two big questions. I mean, to start with the first, so, the DNA was, a blank sheet of paper, a first endowment of money. Of course, over the years, we then ended up raising also a lot of money from other sources, et cetera. But we started with a significant pile. It's not the biggest pile of money in the world by any means, but it was big enough also to do really interesting things and bring in lots of real talented people, entrepreneurs and others. Look, we had all grown up in California, and California is unique in that it's an amazing engine at creating wealth, but it does it through innovation. And most places in the world, where wealth is created, it's really not typically innovation. It's things like natural resources or real estate, or maybe lifestyle and brands like you have in, France, let's say. But in California, it's all about invention. So put yourself back in my shoes. This is now, 2004. There's a large sum of money that will be eventually spent philanthropically. Plus, we have the ability to raise more, and a blank sheet of paper. And how do we make money and do some good? Well, being nerds, being from California, of course, we were drawn to the role of innovation and funding innovation. And so one of the very early ideas, which is today the work I co-manage with one of my partners, was to invest through venture capital into new innovation that, as it scaled, as it became successful, was solving a big problem in the world. And that big problem very often, more often than not, ends up being climate change. There are many other problems, some of them environmental, social, many kinds, but certainly this strategy around deep tech, clean tech is been very, very powerful way to think about and hope to address decarbonizing the world and derailing whatever we can, derailing climate change. Now, we also had other ideas. And so there are many other people that we funded and backed over the last, what will soon be 20 years, because it takes a village. And so, you also have to build things where it's not a new product, right? But you have to go build factories or build things like solar plants, and you have to tackle agriculture. And even in how we deal with things like capital markets, using your ownership of equities as a way to influence companies to take these problems seriously. So we have my partners and I have been really interested and intrigued about, many dozens, hundreds of different ways, different ideas that you can combine that nexus of making good money for the risk, but also having a real impact. But my passion and where I put my hours and my days is in that, venture capital, the funding of early stage technology that can scale to fix problems.
This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual.
Welcome back at WEBIT Virtual and our discussion with the amazing Ion Yadigaroglu, partner at Capricorn's Technology Impact Fund, early investor in Tesla, SpaceX, QuantumScape, Planet, Sail Drone, Nuvia, Jobia Innovation, Helion Energy, and so many more.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, to come to the topic of AI, that's obviously a big component to all of this innovation, which as it scales can help address and fix issues. And a lot of the innovation has to do with things like sensors, really, or the generation of huge data sets. The amount of, to give you an example, we seed funded a company close to 10 years ago called Planet, which is orbiting a constellation of satellites that images the globe essentially continuously. At least once a day is taking an image of every part on the planet. And what you can do with something like that, and just as an example of many, many things going on in the world, is you can generate an absolute astounding amount of information. So for instance, you're looking at every tree in the world every single day. And so in the case of a space-based constellation, it's relatively easy to take all those pictures, but then you have to beam them down to Earth. That's actually pretty hard. That wasn't possible until about 10 years ago. That's why you couldn't do a problem like that until 10 years ago, because you needed to invent a modem, a wireless modem that could beam down terabytes of information from space a day from a constellation. But even more importantly, what do you do with terabytes a day? You need to be able to analyze it. So you need the equivalent, you need Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud and these massive sort of data center infrastructures to exist. And they need to analyze all that data together with the data from yesterday and the day before and the day before and so forth. So it's just a staggering amount. I mean, as humans, we just don't understand the scale of some of these data sets. And if you don't have AI, you can't extract what you need from that to manage these problems and therefore have a hope to addressing them. So it's not enough to see every tree in the world every day, but you have to make the difference between a tree that's fallen because it was, it's time to die, or a forest that's diseased, or illegal deforestation somewhere in the Amazon. And then you have to tie that to all kinds of other data to make it more actionable. Like why is that part being deforested? And do you see a week later a bunch of new dots show up on the map, which are cattle? And so you can infer from that piece was deforested because there's a rancher coming in. All these things today AI can do, and can do objectively, unemotionally, and at very, very low cost. And so for the first time, we're having the ability to solve some of these things, I think, by simply measuring them and therefore having a chance to manage them better.
I remember when I first met the founder of planet.com, I was like blown away by the vision of the world at that moment. It was like many years ago. So you really know what kind of companies to invest in, being among the first investors in Tesla, including. So I guess that's a good time to ask you, what is, according to you, the future of sustainable transportation? How important is sustainable transportation for the future? Maybe that's even better question.
Sure. So in the beginning, that evolved a bit over time. So if you look at how we came into those very early funding rounds of Tesla, back, whatever that was, about 15 years ago. That was really initially because of J.B. Straubel. So he was a student at Stanford undergrad when I was in graduate school. So I ended up being his teaching assistant in the honors physics program one year. So that's how I first met him. And he was obviously a brilliant guy. And he came around a couple of years later, and with a really counterintuitive understanding of how to electrify cars. So at first it was more about electrification than the autonomy, but of course they're very linked, and there are multiple linkages that all make transportation more sustainable, that are all happening, as you know, in a very big way with really big stakes. So to go back to the beginning, when JB first came around, it's not like people didn't see the potential of electrifying the car. Electric motors are fundamentally much more powerful, can be controlled very, very well, are very small and dense for the power, are extremely reliable, are relatively cheap to make. They have a lot of advantages. The world is slowly electrifying everywhere. But of course, the hard part was battery systems. They're bulky and heavy and expensive. And power electronics were also an issue. The control software was also difficult. How do you control the performance, all the dynamics of a car? I mean, those kind of things 20 years ago were still challenging problems. And JB came with these really fundamental understanding of how these things were changing, compounding over decades. And that if he worked really hard with his co-founders and team, 5 years later, they would be able to compete with high-end sports cars. And the idea is, even though the Toyotas and GMs and everyone had looked at this, they had actually misunderstood the math. And that's where you need brilliant people like JB to do the math correctly and see an opportunity that isn't always obvious. It's only obvious once they've actually realized it. And the key innovation there, the key insight was that everyone was tricked. Because the battery was the big, heavy, expensive thing, everyone was trying to find a way to electrify cars by making the battery really small.
Yeah.
And it turns out that that's not a good way to do it. You really had to do the opposite and make the battery as big as it could fit on 4 wheels. And that is what really created the value proposition for what Tesla has become and the initial high volume car, which is Model S. To make the transportation truly sustainable, that's one key ingredient, electrification. Of course, there's another key ingredient, which Uber is more famously known for, which is the ability to call into mobility services through the convenience of your mobile phone that knows where you are and can easily know where you're going, right? So to be able to dispatch transportation assets conveniently from your phone, that's a key ingredient as well. The other key ingredient is autonomy. So it sounds like that's about not having people drive their own car, but it's much more profound than that. Humans spend a giant amount of time driving themselves, what they don't really want to do. So there are some professional drivers, especially in places like trucking, where almost every driver is professional. Frankly, everyone is. But if you look at personal transportation, most people don't really want to drive themselves. It's just that it's cheaper to do it yourself. But it implies also that you own your own car. It's difficult to create models that are in between. They exist, right? The zip cars and things like that exist, but they don't really reach the efficiency. And so it's really by combining the magic of AI, of electrification, and the dispatch of mobility, where you really push the system to being much more energy efficient, lower environmental footprint, and more convenient and cheaper.
Let's not forget that this, and just to continue your thoughts, if you allow me, it's only 4% of the time that you own a car that you actually drive it. So on the top of not being interested of driving that car, well, some of us love driving cars, especially in the past, it was fast driving cars. Now, a little bit laid back, but again, fast enough. But using it only 4 times of the time you own it, and then paying additionally for parkings and for all the taxes, etc., I do believe that makes so much case that it's like mind-blowing. But I'm guessing our fantastic audience knows very well who you are and what is Capricorn for, and how much you are really changing the world around you. I mean, this is not a cliche in your case, but what I would call, maybe you would call it differently, what are your other examples of your forward thinking, or I would say like your leaps into the future when it comes to investments beyond the Tesla and we've mentioned Planet, of course, but what would you say or investments for the future with really large impact beyond those?
Well, I can tell you that, and I'll give you a few examples of things, but I can tell you that sometimes people look at the past, and because we've had a lot of fun and a lot of success, they say, wow, I guess I missed it. All the good fun was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and now, it's all been done. So that couldn't be more wrong. I mean, it's rare that a week or a month goes by where we're not really, blown away by a new idea, a new insight that has the potential to do this kind of change over the next 10 or 20 years. So we're not running out of good ideas, that's for sure, as in the world. And the use of that combinations of AI and software and new hardware and new materials, new biology, new chemistry, it's really extraordinary. And well, to give you a few examples, since we were on cars, you've probably read in the paper, and there's some great articles out there, that after leading the engineering and technology at Tesla since the beginning, JB left 2 years ago to form a new company called Redwood Materials. And Redwood is building the mirror image of the gigafactories to build the cars, and really is disassembling, recycling them back into the raw materials that you're going to make those new cars and battery packs from. And of course, that is a wonderfully circular story. I mean, for me personally, obviously, because we started, that was our second investment so long ago. So to be back in a new company with JB is a wonderful story, just, for us, just personally wonderful. But it's also full cycle in the environmental kind of thinking, right? You're taking what you're making back into your raw materials. But it's much more interesting even than that. So it turns out that if you look forward the next 10 or 20 years, when you're making a car and a battery pack and a motor and all that, when you're making it from materials that you're getting from nature, that you're mining out of nature, there's kind of a floor to the price and the footprint to those materials. There's a certain amount of energy and money it costs to get that from rocks and sands and underground aquifers, etc. But if you're taking a car that already has everything in it, it's just aged, that you need to make a new car, then there's no floor. So if you look at the next couple of decades, there's a chance that you can get as much improvement in driving the competitiveness of electric drivetrains forward from, let's call it the recycling problem. It's more complicated than that, but let's call it the recycling issue, than you can from new technology. They're probably comparable in what they're going to deliver in terms of making that the uptake of electric drivetrains in transportation and also on the grid in improving that uptake. So that's really that's the kind of thing we get really excited about. Now let's go to something completely different, but still maybe in the physical area, in the kind of industrial physical area. Well, we tend to focus on energy and power, right? Solar, wind, battery systems, and on transportation, the cars and boats and trucks. But of course, the other piece that uses giant amounts of petroleum is the petrochemical industry. And so we need solutions there. So I think hydrogen is incredibly exciting, but it's really for that it's exciting for us. And there is now the potential to, rather than, you're wearing, nice clothes and some nice shoes, Plamen, and rather than think of, I got those from a field that grew my cotton, and I got my sneakers from sticking a straw in the ground and pulling up some petroleum from it, from which I'm going to make aromatic molecules and olefins and mix it all into plastics. What if we gave you a box and there was a solar panel and out came the sneaker? And that's really, when we're looking at this, you could call it the hydrogen economy. That's really what we're looking at. We're looking at the ingredients of things like water and CO2 and solar energy or wind energy going into a magic box. And out of that will come things like the plastic in your sneakers or, whatever it is that you're manufacturing. And so I know I'm sounding a bit, lofty on that front, but that's really, when you look at what we're doing, that's one of the really exciting places that we can now drive a lot of new technology So that would be an area, for instance, that really blows the mind if you look at the next 10 or 20 years.
Jon, I wish more people sound as lofty as you. By the way, you're very kind. Thanks for the compliment. These clothes, though, are kind of special. They are produced by refurbished materials. Beyond that, while being produced, they used 10% of the usual quantity of water that needs to be, it's over 900 liters per pant. It's crazy. I mean, this is one of the world's biggest and most terrible polluters, along with agriculture. But obviously, we cannot stop eating, and we still need some clothes from time to time, even though that this crisis showed us that we can deal with a little bit less, I would say. But at the end of the day, yeah, I believe we all have to be as lofty as you are. Lofty. It's not even something that I would use to describe you. But I can't agree more with what you're saying in regards to the right time. And I'm happy and grateful for you putting this on the table. I believe that there's never been better time. I mean, you're running like a cumulatively 6 billion fund in assets, but even at different smaller levels where we, the normal people, function, the regular people, I would say, maybe I'm not normal, but regular. We see so much of money and pouring into great ideas. I see it with our investments. I see it with my own new startup, which the Corona put me back into the entrepreneur shoes. I haven't been there for a while, even though I'm always entrepreneur by heart. But building up a startup with all these virtual event platforms, which is currently servicing a lot of governments and UN organizations. We see how much interest and money are there on the market. So definitely looking at you guys, all of you that are the founders with the bravery and with the mission to actually really make someone's life better, not maybe the whole world, but maybe few people around you, and then expanding this crowd of people you make better lives with. That will be the right time for you. Just great. Am I right?
You are. Look, it is a lot of fun, and the only frustrating bit is that, when you're the funder, you get to write the checks. You don't get to do the work. But we have this just absolutely magical opportunity to back people who are extraordinary, right? And so we kind of live off their success. We do help them because, of course, they need money, and sometimes it's not just money. Sometimes it's because so many things come to a venture capital firm, so many different ideas and competitors and partners, and so we can help them sometimes see through all that. Because as the entrepreneur needs to focus a bit myopically on delivering what they're doing, they don't have quite the same time to look at everything around them. But in the end, it's all about backing these extraordinary people. And, I'm so encouraged. Brilliant people who are coming out of universities or other jobs today, they want to work on these kinds of problems, right? And so
absolutely
never had more brains and more motivation for people to, yes, do well, create successful companies and products that can scale, even hyperscale, but they also want to see some meaning in what they're doing, real meaning. And nobody wants to just, be a normal industrial guy or a normal banker or a normal lawyer, right? Everyone's kind of looking for that ability to combine something more meaningful with success.
Absolutely. Thank you for the race of positivism that you're spreading through our over 1 million community around the world. We have sent out some to number of our community members around the world the information that we are going to meet you, and you're going to be among the first to open the second season of WEBIT Virtual. And we have received a bunch of questions, which I'm obviously not going to ask you all of them, but at least some. And this one comes from India, and it is about what are you working on now? What is keeping you excited at Capricorn these days? You kind of answered, but maybe something more specific, if you can open the box in the kitchen. You told me that the past 2 weeks you were surviving. What did you survive from?
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to disappoint. We can't, in the early stages, sadly, we often have to respect the privacy of the companies that we're funding.
But it was good trying it, right?
Yes, it was good try. But generally, yeah, these are what the spaces I mentioned are very rich spaces. How do you? I mentioned two. I think, and that's not one company. Certainly, if you look at how we need to rebuild the chemical space and the manufacturing space. I mentioned the ability to synthesize chemistry with ingredients of molecules that exist in nature, like water, without any sort of mining or problematic sourcing, like things like water and CO2 and minerals. And how can you create a manufacturing system that takes renewable energy and makes the products we need? You mentioned, your clothes and the recyclability of them. That's, of course, closing the loop on these things and finding ways to take end-of-life material back into the system. That's, I think, will remain incredibly rich and important idea. On manufacturing, we also are getting better and better at using so-called additive methods, right? 3D printing. And nowadays, it's becoming routine, and it's expanding in a way that is really, really surprising if you're not used to seeing these kind of exponential curves. These industries went from being things you saw in Star Trek, the replicator, to being, it works, but it's very expensive and clunky, and you're doing it kind of to do fun new things, to maybe you're making one part because it's really hard to make it differently, to now just deciding, hey, we don't need to use metal casting. We're just going to do metal printing. And so that continues to be a super exciting, very, very rich space. A lot of AI, by the way, a lot of the improvements come from software that, no manufacturing technique is perfect. So one of the keys to techniques like that is to have a tight feedback loop between the machine that's making something, the model of what you wanted to make, and a layer of AI in between that's making sure that the machine is doing the best it can to make that part for you. That is, for instance, one of the key components driving additive forward right now.
This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual.
Welcome back to our discussion with Ion Yadigaroglu, partner at the Capricorn's Technology Impact Fund and early investor in Tesla, SpaceX, QuantumScape, Planet, Saildrone, Innovium, Nuvia Joby Aviation, Helion Energy, and so many more. Thank you. So I think that this somehow could have maybe satisfied the appetite for inside information from Capricorn. There were other questions like, can you name the latest investments you have done? I will leave it up to you to identify and share such information during this discussion, which unfortunately is not endless. I wish it is, but I'm respectful of your time and the limitations of all our community members' time. So maybe in order to wrap and also to give a kind of your forward thinking, what are the current major challenges for a clean tech startup facing? And what would be your advice from you for them to focus on? And yeah, I'm guessing this question came from a startup founder. So
yeah, I don't know. I don't mean to be presumptuous. I think it's it's doing a startup is not for everyone. Those who are entrepreneurs know that it's the difficult path, right? It's full of uncertainty. The highs are high and the lows can be low. It can be very stressful, but for those who have the DNA to really like to be able to be in the middle of those things it can also be an extraordinary experience. And certainly the time is for those who want to direct their energy towards some of these new, very disruptive open spaces, like how to deal with climate or how to leverage AI into so many of these problems where AI is such a key ingredient. It is an incredibly rich couple of decades ahead of us. We're really only getting started. And so there's, giant opportunity. So I think it's probably harder to get someone really excited about doing another app, although there will still be incredible apps developed that, blow our mind, right? That are just much better than the prior version of that app or something new. But it doesn't feel like, just doing an app is sort of where the action is the next 10 or 20 years, right? There's a much richer spaces opening up that are just as exciting and disruptive, that involve, yes, software and algorithms and machine learning / AI, often in combinations with new materials, new semiconductors, new chips, new chemistry, new biology, new business models, new financing structures. So the permutations of all that continue to seem endless, and the world's problems just continue to grow. So a lot of opportunity and a lot of excitement.
Absolutely, Jan. And I'm here standing straight in front of you, and I feel we are also, and I'm absolutely happy and honored about it, but I also feel that obviously if more people do something right, things will turn really very, very quickly. On our side, with the push of Corona, I mean, we've been virtualizing WEBIT for a while, but with the push of Corona, we moved completely virtual as many others. But through the platform itself, for the past 6 months, running events from the first in the history of UN SDG Action Zone, UNGA, and then Climate Ambition Summit, and then the Climate Dialogues 2020, and then all of these, plus, of course, all the WEBITs, plus many other large-scale events, we've been calculating. I'm not going to throw numbers now, but I would say hundreds of thousands of kilograms of carbon dioxide has been saved from people not traveling to these events, but still being able to be together and to exchange and share the beauty of their minds together, creating even more beautiful world. The same applies to garbage. I mean, one person for one day is creating a phenomenal quantity of landfill and garbage, which I don't feel bad about when I see 15,000 people, many of them friends, coming to WEBIT. I'm sure many others don't. But now when we save all this, it feels so good. So I'm just sharing it to you because I know you care. And from that perspective, I would like to know, what are the big players now, in your opinion, who really get the point and have the power, the energy, and do it the right way so that they really make a positive impact now in the world? And of course, in the areas where we were just discussing about.
Well, I've been, I really see a big shift, and I think COVID has helped a lot. We, through our work, we get to know a lot of CEOs of large incumbent companies, because we often have connective tissue between the large incumbent companies, the startups, the new technology. And that's one of the things that we can be helpful with as investors to our entrepreneurs. And so we have spent a lot of time with the leadership of big companies. And I've been very, very critical, because in the end, there's been just a staggering lack of leadership from big companies. A lot of people say the right things and show interest, but then go back to managing their business week to week, month to month, and don't embrace the change, the innovation that's needed to really tackle new problems and put their business in a place that it will thrive for the next decades. I had a call, I'll give you an example, the most obvious example. I had a call with the leadership of a number of the largest oil companies a couple of months ago. And they wanted to talk to the enemy. I'm viewed as the enemy because, we do all these new things. But they were curious. I mean, they're humans too. They were curious to talk to a few people that they would not normally, have over lunch or dinner, and they really wanted to talk about environmental metrics and footprints and things. And one of them said, we're confused about all the different ways we're supposed to deal with this ESG. How do we apply it to our drilling? And I had to stop him and I say, well, why don't you start by doing your job? Your market cap, which you guys represented the largest part of the S&P 15 years ago, you're now the smallest industry. So you're not doing your job. So, talking about the ESG footprint of your wells and you can do slightly better or slightly worse, that's not the topic, right? The topic is you continue to manage this business you've been in, you became CEO 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago. So you're just managing it month to month, but you're just running it into a wall. And it will go up, it will go down, but we all know where it's ending, which is nowhere. And of course that created, a bit of a reaction. And it was the strangest conversation I ever had, because several of them said, well, you don't understand, Jan. We have all these communities that depend on us, all our employees, governments. And basically they were saying, we're not greedy managers of for-profit companies. We're like trying to do good. I said, well, now I'm confused because I thought you were trying to create shareholder value. So look, I've been usually very critical of the management of big companies. They just have not been willing to make the kind of investments you need to really change their business and grow new businesses that are worth way more than their old business, which is doing so much harm. But I think that has changed due to COVID. I think that the conversations you can have right now are completely different. They just don't want to do the greenwashing anymore. They've realized that change is coming. COVID proved it, right? They've seen, even if they're not in an affected business, they've seen airlines completely shut down. They've seen hotel groups go out of business, food service and restaurants, tourism. I mean, so many things that have been broken through COVID. And I think it's woken people up. And as many people have really suffered the last months, but many also report some good in all this suffering, right? And saying, I've connected better with my family, or I don't miss some of the air travel that we used to do, or many other things. And so I think it's just been a time of great reckoning and great reevaluation. And I know it's a popular thing to just be enthusiastic, but I truly am right now. I think the conversations going on at the board level, CEO level, executive team level of many large public companies has shifted in a very fundamental way.
Absolutely, Jan. And I remember we were discussing some time ago with part of our closest committees at WEBIT, and it was this notion of, yes, we grow with exponential trends, but it's like the human brain that works in a simple way: first come, first serve. And we kept on also forgetting at exponential rate important things about our planet, about our mere real reason for existence, which I believe, and as a good friend of mine also shared some time ago, is the real deep understanding of love is maybe one of the real reasons for us to be here. So I can't agree more with what you're saying, and I'm happy that you see these trends, because if they're there at the surface where you're screening the environment, that's kind of a good signal. Because we really have to wrap up, and that's the last question, I promise. I would like to know what are, and I'm sure that this community of our virtual viewers now at WEBIT would like to hear you. What are the hot trends that you see in the sector that the WEBIT community and everyone else who is going to be watching this, we believe in free sharing of knowledge and know-how, should be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I look, you know where these, these are not secrets. And in some ways, we're living a time where, certainly if you look at like the market participants and all that, it's almost too hot, right? There's just a lot of really, really frenetic activity out there. So I don't need to add to fuel to the fire. But look, these new technologies, changes in consumption patterns, the change in how we're evaluating some of these problems differently, like the environmental footprints of things differently today than we did even a year ago. I mean, these are major, major forces. And certainly we need to end with the topic you started with, which is that the ability of software to go beyond just being calculation, but its ability to treat data sets and amounts of bits and information that are so large that the intuition almost fails to grasp the scale of this. You say there's 10 billion transistors on this chip. What does that mean? Most people don't understand, have no relationship to that. So the ability of all that, of the AI, machine learning, inference techniques, whatever pieces of software it's a wide spectrum of things we're talking about, to make sense of that and be the life, the spirit that adds intelligence to all that new technology is a key part of the equation.
Thank you so much, Ion. I can't say how grateful I am for you accepting our invitation. Thank you for spending time with us and with our WEBIT community, with people from all around the world. Hope you have enjoyed our discussion with Ion and you have somehow got inspired, because I personally got, hopefully I did even more than that, so inspired that I'm thinking of what should be the next we can do in the area where we became one of the most trusted and strongest. And I'm sure that if all of us do things like this, and if we have more of these amazing examples of not only people with big hearts, but with vision and sustainable investments, which are at the end of the day making possible for more investments to be made in the future, that would be the most beautiful future I can predict. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you for sharing your time, and I look forward to see you next again at WEBIT Virtual, and one day, sooner or later, better sooner, again in person. Thank you. See you next WEBIT Virtual.
This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual.